This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Saturday Social with me, your host, Will Mercer. Today we are talking about international schools. I'm joined by the fantastic Sam Houseago. We're going to be talking about some of the similarities, the differences, and the things we wish we had known before we started working in international schools.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Blue Monday is the name given to a day in January, typically the third Monday of the month, said by a UK travel company, Sky Travel, to be the most depressing day of the year. The concept was first published in a 2005 press release from the company, which claimed to have calculated the date using an, quote, equation, end quote. It takes into account weather conditions and thus only applies to the Northern Hemisphere. Some have dismissed the idea as pseudoscience. Now, that is not my own original thought. That is me quoting the Wikipedia article on Blue Monday. So, pseudoscience or not, I thought it was appropriate to do a podcast on a show on international schools at this time of year, as we know what it's like. The nights are long, the days are short, and they're cold, they're gloomy. And this is the time of year that lots of people look around and consider a change of scenery. Also, and this may be coincidental, lots of international schools are hiring at this time as well. So we, and I say we because I'm joined by the fantastic Sam Houseago, we are going to talk about our experience applying for and working at international schools. So, before I go any further, hi Sam.
Hi Will, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Great to have you here. How are you? How's your week been?
My week's been very good. You know, I'm sure lots of other international teachers are trying to get over the jet lag, waking up early again, but it's very nice going back to our schools, our classes, seeing the beautiful smiling faces of our pupils, maybe new pupils who are joining us as they do at this time of year as well. And yeah, just had a really nice week getting to see everybody again.
Wonderful, wonderful. What a delightful answer.
Thank you.
Love it. So, I'm going to call it a disclaimer, a health warning, whatever. I'm going to mention at this point that, of course, we will be talking an awful lot about our own personal experiences because that's our knowledge base. But we are going to try and generalize as much as we can. So we don't want this to be a podcast about ourselves or the school that we happen to work at. We want this to contain some ideas and perhaps some tips or something that might be useful for people who are considering working in an international school themselves. And for those of you who are already working in international schools, we hope a lot of what we say will ring true, even if your context is a bit different to our one. So, Sam, back to you. I'm going to start by getting to know you a little bit. Tell us, how did you get into teaching?
Just like so many of us, I just fell into it. I have a background in anthropology. That was my degree. And so I wanted to go out and experience other countries in the world. And one of the easiest way was to go be an English language teacher. So I did that for a year. Turns out I really like teaching. I'm actually really good at teaching, if I say so for myself. Went back to the UK, trained to be a teacher, then did some work teaching in state schools for a couple of years in London before moving back to Japan.
So that's Japan is where it all started.
Japan's where it started. Japan's where it's continuing, and for me personally, it's sort of going to continue on for much longer because it's been a really enjoyable experience teaching in international schools.
All right. So I mean, you sound very positive so far, but why did you come here in the first place? What was behind your decision to not just change school but change country?
Multiple things. positively, I really want to focus on that. I really personally, I feel really well connected to Japan. I really enjoy the culture. I've always had friendly experiences here. I was always felt very safe. I've and it went after, I've visited it a few times, and I was like, I really want to try and see if I can make a life here, and it is possible.
Mm.
Thinking of a bit more negatively, the UK, it's going through a tough time right now. Working in London, earning what I was as a state school teacher, I was kind of losing money quite a lot.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I found that I could earn quite well still in other countries. The pay, cost of living is very different,
Mhm.
doing the research and all of that. And,
Mhm.
still can get home comforts and such.
Mhm.
I was very happy when I found my first bar of dairy milk over
Wonderful,
here.
wonderful. A rite of passage
Yes.
for any teacher out here. So, if I'm hearing you, there's sort of two areas there. There's the cultural, if I can put it that way. There's sort of there's their sense of what it is like to be in a country or the values the country holds, but also the financial as well, the material side, where teaching is what it is in the UK with a certain salary, and it has a certain material conditions, let's say, which will often be very, very different in different countries and therefore in international schools. All right, so you're here now. Now you're like me. You've been here about a year and a half,
Mm.
and I mean, how are you finding it so far? I mean, so shall we talk surprises? Is there something that you would say has been a particular surprise, pleasant or otherwise?
So I've really enjoyed teaching internationally. One of the biggest surprises I found was that the general behaviour of the children I found was pretty similar. So I didn't really have to adapt my teaching style to that much. You got to have some of those chatty kids, sometimes in a different language. Chat is still chat.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have those daydreamers. You got to have those real good eggs who are working really hard. You got a nice range and mix of personalities, and it was still reflected similar to the behaviour of the children I had taught back in the UK. So that was really easy to adapt.
So children are children.
Yeah, children are children, regardless of where
mm.
you go. And sometimes there's more of them, sometimes there's less of them as well. That also helps. That was, a really nice surprise. Have you found it similar?
Yeah,
Different?
I think so. I've had a very similar experience where the similarities are greater than the differences,
Yeah.
for sure. There are differences, but they don't tend to come directly from the children themselves. I would say they come from. There are differences, but they come from lots of different places.
Yeah.
But no, I'm like you. The dynamics of a class and the sort of the personality, let's say the personalities that you tend to see. It's interesting how often the same types of behavior will come up, even though the culture is undeniably quite different.
Even some of the interests that the children have. If I go to an inner city school in London and I start talking about Minecraft, all the children will get really excited and they'll want to tell me what they think of it. Same as my classroom. If I start talking about Minecraft, those kind of things, just to gauge and help create relationships with children because they want to feel connection, then there's so much of this connections that you can make with these children.
So much of their culture comes from, a lot of it comes from the internet, obviously.
Yeah.
And children will tend to want to watch the same stuff on YouTube in almost any country. We find, I mean, you give an example already. So that's the children's side. But what about other things? I mean, do you find you had particular surprises with staff members or with your relationship with the parents?
So with the parents, with the international schools that I'm thinking about, your children come from a really great big space. Some are traveling maybe an hour to get to that school because they've really wanted to come specifically to that school. It's not like a state school where everyone's in a certain catchment area and they're walking to school.
Right.
And that way parents are dropping off kids. You're seeing the parents every single day, and you're, could have little chats if you need to have catch-ups with them or anything like that.
I suppose this sort of school you're talking about, you get children commuting in, even very young children. And I suppose that's a very Japanese thing, actually. That is a general cultural difference. You will see very, very small children taking public transport entirely, by themselves, even if it's a very, very crowded train or whatever. You will see 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, whatever, taking very long journeys every single day.
Yeah, and you do really feel for them because I'm tired after an hour-long journey commuting to get to school. And these poor,
They're young. They
they're
can
young.
stand up. They can. I'm old. Give me the chair.
But I'm less face forward with the parents. A lot of my conversations with parents are now online with them,
Mm-hmm.
and that does create challenges. The parents don't speak the same language as me sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and that can create some challenges. And they get worried about their communication to me and that. So you really need to reassuring with parents
Mm-hmm.
and change the way you speak to them to make it really easy for them to understand, and making sure that I'm being conscious of that. But then they are also using a lot of chat GPT,
Yes.
we find, and
it's all
the tone.
I find my messages from parents are almost incredibly well written.
Yeah.
It's not sort of the English isn't, I can't understand what's being said, as I very much can understand what's being said. But obviously ChatGPT or some program has been used to write this message to me. And so while the English is perfectly understandable, the tone of it, like you say, sorry, I did interrupt you, the tone can be a bit, maybe, you have to be charitable, let's say, when you read these messages sometimes.
Generally, because the parents have specifically chosen to come to this school, and like a lot of these other international schools, and maybe they're paying a fee as well, they can be very, very supportive of us, and the school has sold them an ideology of what the school is going to help and support with the pupils, and they also support it as well because they've chosen to come to us. It is a bit different because it is a bit of a customer kind of situation there, and sometimes if a child might leave, you kind of got to make sure, that's not personal, because pupils move all the time in international schools.
Yes, yeah.
That's another thing that's different with the pupils. You get a lot of new faces, and a lot of times because the parents get jobs abroad, or sometimes parents shop around for these schools as well, and they go to try them all out before really sitting down.
Well, if I can jump in there, because it's interesting. So obviously, as I'm sure is obvious from what you said, the school you're talking about is a fee-paying private school, as well as obviously an international school. And I know not every international school will be a fee-paying school, but many will be. And many of the kinds that are employing internationally, where you can get a job even if you're in the UK, I think it's fair to say most of those are private schools, and that comes with its own set of conditions, let's say, of difference from the UK state sector. So some of the things we're going to say are because we're talking about an international school as an international school, whereas some of it would of course be relevant to the experience of working in a private school, a fee-paying private school. So this might be the case even if this school was in the UK. But I want to go back to something you said there. Flight. I'm struggling to find the right word off the top of my head, but that there can be a lot of change in international schools, right? As you said, parents move around, children move around. So there's definitely more change year on year, in fact, term on term, than you might expect in a UK state school.
Yeah, with international schools, you're of course getting international children. Some of these children have lived in multiple different countries, and they themselves have gone to lots of different schools, and sometimes it's for a short period where they're just like, we're just here for years, my parents got a new job, but sometimes the parents are now like, okay, now we're settling, and you have to help support these pupils settle in. They might have a bit of anxiety because they've not had so secure friendships or
new school and possibly new country
as well, right? New country, new language, lots of new things for these for them, but it's really nice because you sort of learn how to create relationships very quickly with these pupils, because that's how to help them make them feel settled, and you get very good at quickly assessing needs of pupils as well, because you suddenly get, oh, by the way, you got 3 new pupils coming in now, here you go. And it's very, very, very interesting.
Well, I think that's a very interesting point, what you mentioned about assessments, because obviously a lot of assessment systems are nation based, right? So if you're in the UK state sector, you are working through a certain set of agreed assessments which will apply to most schools. Okay, if children are going from one country to another, they're hopping in and out of these systems. So your assessment that you're doing with these children coming in often has to be much more, I guess, bespoke, or much more based on your own skills and your own observations. I guess what I'm saying is it would be nonsensical to expect 15 different children from 15 different countries and different educational systems to all be really good at, let's say, the year 4 times tables test, to take an example. Your understanding and your assessment of these children has to be much more, well, it often has to be much more flexible, right? And that can become a real strength with this practice.
Yeah, for a very specific example, I found that I had got in my class, I teach prep 3 year 3 class, so they're about 7 to 8 years old. By that age, I would have expected all of my pupils to learn something about fractions, but I would say about half the class who've been gone to some other schools in Asia where fractions are done at a higher age level had never even heard of a half or a quarter, and that's something I had to quickly adapt to my learning and support these pupils in, because we had to get all of the pupils at the same level as best we could, because half of them had done it, half of them had not. And then as our school curriculum is like, in our school curriculum, we are teaching at that age level. And that's something I found very interesting to think about. I'm going to have to take into consideration other countries' curriculums and what have they taught.
Exactly. And I guess on the flip side of that, there'll be things they may not have done you might have expected them to have done. But on the other side, there'll be things that they probably have done to a very high level, or maybe that they've already mastered, that you're like, wow, you're 8 years old and your multiplication is already at this much higher level than I might be used to seeing.
Exactly, yeah.
So there's, I guess, diversity is what we're talking about, right? This is diversity of student, pupil backgrounds. But what about, while we're on diversity, I think one thing for me that's been perhaps the biggest difference with my previous experience in the UK state sector is the diversity of the staff. And I mean diversity in the sense of their educational backgrounds and their training, and kind of the sort of teachers they are, really. Whereas in the UK, I think I'm right in saying this, every teacher I ever worked with spent most of their time, or at least a lot of their time, within the UK system. That's what they've been trained in. They've got their QTS, all that stuff. A lot of our colleagues here, some are from the UK, others are from Commonwealth countries. We have teachers from the US, from Japan as well, from all over. And that's a great opportunity. You can really learn from the way other people do things. And it's a really great way to get experience of other teaching styles in quite a short period of time. Like, it can be quite an intense learning curve, getting to sort of fit in and work with these different colleagues. I don't know what your experience has been like with this.
I found that they are some of the most creative colleagues that I've ever worked with. Puts my displays to shame every single time, as they just can get boundless amount of resources and support, and give the support to these pupils that I've never really ever thought of doing. So being able to learn from these colleagues has been really helpful to me. And also, I was just thinking about this now as you're saying this, about 5 different countries these colleagues have come from. That's 5 different accents that our pupils are now listening to. And then it creates these pupils with a very unique accent where it's all a little bit of British, a little bit of American, a little bit of Kiwi, a little bit of everything.
A bit of spelling from here, a bit of spelling from there.
And then it just doesn't matter. Who cares if there's a U in favourite? That's something which at the international school, like, we've had to really adapt to, because to tell a child that even though they look at this word, that's how we spell it in the UK, that's how they spell it in America, and they just need to help to understand that. You've got to be flexible within yourselves. I'm going to spell it the British way because that's how I've been taught, and that's how I'm going to fall upon. But you're going to speak to your art teacher and they're going to ask you, what's your favourite colour?
But you know what? In its own way, that's a good example of international mindedness, right? And that's that that's that disposition, I suppose, that international schools will often talk about, and it can be quite difficult to pin down. I think sometimes, like, quite exactly what does international mindedness look like, because it's a very big concept, and that's a lovely, I mean, that's a lovely practical example of it. And that's the sort of thing that the parents want for their children, right? Because I suppose, again, this is maybe a difference from, certainly it was different from my experience in UK state sector. Everyone has chosen your school. They've sort of shopped around, as it were. They've done their research. They've, worked hard to get their children to come to this school. As you said earlier, a lot of them don't live nearby at all. In fact, they have quite long commutes. So they've really gotten behind the educational philosophy of the school. So what comes along with that is a sense of what do they want and how can we deliver it? Now, parental expectations are a big part of any school. I think UK state sector schools, they always take on their parental expectations on board. But I think the expectations are going to be different in an international school. To go back to what I was saying a minute ago, international mindedness is definitely one of those. But what do you think? What sort of, do you feel that what's expected of you from parents is different from your previous experience in the UK? Or do you think actually it is pretty similar?
From my experiences, I've worked in some of the most poorest areas of London where the parents had themselves have gone to that primary school. They've lived on the estate right next to it, and then they didn't enjoy their education. And so they sort of passed that on through generationally to their children who didn't enjoy that education as well. And it was a real fight to help get parents on board, and then also to get their children on board as well.
That sort of buy-in wasn't there.
Yes, that was from my experience. I'd worked in 3 different schools and they were very different, but some of the schools were like, the parents were really just didn't have any faith in the system because they felt like it failed them. But at our school, at the international school that I currently work at, the parents who have been sold the school, essentially, they'd gone on tours, they had interviews, they'd spoken to the head teacher, they had looked at the brochures, they'd come to event days, they had observed us teaching, they had looked at all of the wonderful displays that are showing all of the activities that people are doing. They are really gung-ho for the school. They can be paying quite a lot of money as well for it. It's a commitment. And it's
a lifestyle
as
well, because I mean, as I said before, I'm sure a lot of what we're saying is true of lots of fee-paying schools around the world. But if let's say, okay, so we're in Tokyo right now. If I'm a parent in Japan, if I want my child to go to an excellent Japanese school, there are lots of excellent Japanese schools out there. But, of course there are. I'm sure some are fee-paying, some are not. But it's one decision to say, okay, I want my child to be educated privately, and it's another thing to say, I want my child to be in an international school. That's an extra leap or an extra consideration. And I think you're absolutely right. I think certainly my experience is that parents are fantastically engaged, incredibly supportive of things, and they're really willing to come in and help out, and they generally have a very positive attitude to what's going on.
Typically the parents have a already idea in their mind of what they want their children to do, and it goes for a very, very long journey. They might have even mapped all the way up to which university they're specifically aiming for. And so they want a lot of it.
It's ambitious.
It's very ambitious. I've had parents come up to say, we're a British school, we are advertised that, and so that has a level of, we're going to help your children learn English to a very high degree, and that's a big part of it. They could go to any of these other state schools, which are very, very good educations. We get them to fantastic universities in the long run, but international schools, there is a language level to it as well, where they want to see very well modeled English, and high levels of English writing, reading, and speaking education. And we've had different levels of that with the pupils that have come into our school, but the pupils themselves as well see them as international. I asked a lot of my kids, where do you want to live when you grow up? And I'd say 90% of the class said they want to live in America, they want to live in the Maldives, they want to live in they want to live in Hawaii, in the UK, and stuff like that. They didn't see, like, a lot of children in England feel like they're going to live in England, while a lot of the children in international schools,
Right.
they could live
Right.
anywhere in the world because they're learning English, Chinese, Japanese at our school, or lots of other languages to a very high degree, to the point of it's going to be used for their work and day to day and living in these other countries.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump in there. We're going to take a very short break, but we will be back very soon to continue talking about international schools.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271, because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? It's Bet Show's 40th anniversary and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies, and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.betshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bet.
This
And we're back. This is the Saturday Social. I'm Will Mercer. I'm joined by Sam Houseago. We're talking about international schools. And as always, please listen in with the Podbean app. Text us your thoughts, opinions, questions. We love to respond to them in real time. So, before the break, we were talking about the expectations of our parents might have at an international school. Sam, you were telling us that parents have a certain expectation of the language. They want their children, in our case, at a British school, to be proficient in English, and communicating with that. That's sort of part of the deal, as it were. But if you go a bit deeper, is there something else that parents want from an international school that is behind their reason to go to an international school and not an excellent local school? Is there a sort of cultural expectation that they want? They don't just want their children to learn English, but what is it they also want their children to have?
As they're very diverse international schools, they want their children to be in a place which is very accepting of a diverse community, people from very different backgrounds that have very different ways to live, and to learn about those people and, obviously make new friends with these people as well, which they might not necessarily get in other schools. And
There's a sort of comfort, isn't there?
yeah, especially if they are someone who has regularly moved. We spoke about it's very common for international children to move from country to country and to join a new class, to maybe be a new face and to be accepted,
And to have a comfort and a confidence with that.
Yeah.
To be able to walk into a room you've never walked into before, full of people you've never met before, many of whom may not come from the same place that you come from, may even speak a different language, and yet still work with those people and learn with them.
Yeah, definitely.
I suppose there's something, and again, I feel I'm a broken record here, but I think it does bear repeating. I'm sure this applies to a lot of fee-paying private schools as well, but I think there's a sense in which international schools have to establish themselves with a clear set of cultural values. They have to be able to say to parents very, very, in a very articulate way, this is who we are, this is the sort of child or the sort of education that we value. And I think what it's like to work as a teacher in that sort of school, it's I think some people would really like it, others may struggle with it slightly, but there's a sense where there's an image. The school has to have a sense of itself because it has to establish its own identity. It has to do that if it's going to survive. And I don't know about you, but I found perhaps a difference from, a state school in the UK. They don't have to do it in the same way. Whereas an international school has to push that sense of itself. And so you are a teacher. You have many of the same responsibilities you have in the UK. But you also have a sort of image or a role to play in helping to establish the image and the feel of the school. So, for example, school I work at, there's tours on Fridays. It's a weekly thing. You're quite used to having people coming around and looking at what you're doing. I know lots of international schools have events they do on the weekends or other times where they invite potential pupils, potential families into the school, and I think you've got to play your role as part of that. And I can see some people would love that, and other people might, they might chafe at it a little bit.
I always cringe anytime I see myself on the Instagram. Me bent over talking to a child in a probably
not the most flattering angle.
In a candid photo where it's like, oh yeah, because people are constantly taking pictures.
Yeah.
And I signed up for it. I knew it was happening. And I see my colleagues do it as well. We're always having a look at it and having a laugh about it, and but also being very proud when we see our classes being featured about what they're doing. Sort of selling, kind of the experiences the schools have.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I don't want to lay it on too thick. I don't want to sound too negative about it because I don't think it's cynical. I don't think it's done purely for money or anything like that. I think when a school strives to establish itself and get and push a sense of what it is, it comes from a real place. It comes from what it values in education. And I think that is a valuable thing worth being clear about, and it's worth shouting about. So I don't see them purely like, they're not negative exercises necessarily. And I don't want to make them sound, worse than they are. But I do think it's part of the deal, as it were.
Yeah, you do have to accept that you're going to be there to help sell the school, and that you are creating the curriculum, creating the experiences, creating these.
Well, you're a representative, right?
Yeah.
You are representative. I mean, I know we all represent the profession, and we may not bring the profession into disrepute, but I think with an international school, even more so, you are visible in a way that you may not be in a UK state sector school.
And when parents are coming around doing tours, they will get to know, this is the year 3 teacher. My kid is 6 right now. So if they go to the school that's 7, that's probably might be their teacher next year, and they're going to really look closely at what my displays are like, and they might even come and ask me a question about what we're doing.
To flip that on its head a bit though, this is so my previous experience of my previous school in the UK was great. People were very happy. They stuck around. There was not a lot of staff turnover. People stayed in post for years and years and years. Whereas I know in the international world, it can often be very different. Lots of schools will have a 2-year contract for their staff. And it's I have lots of colleagues, and we've got lots of colleagues who change school and change country quite regularly. They may have worked in 5, 6, 7 different countries. So what does that do for the feel of working in a school, knowing that a lot of your colleagues, and they're not leaving because they're unhappy, I should say. They're not leaving because they're miserable. And it's just the lifestyle that they are doing for whatever reason, for their own reasons. They are changing country relatively frequently. But what does that do for a working environment?
Yeah, there are different international teachers who, like for me, I specifically chose the country I wanted to work in. This would be the country that I probably stay working in. I'm not really going to be looking at other countries to work in. I chose to work in Japan. Other international teachers are working in, because as a teacher, we could go work in any country we can. There's international schools everywhere pretty much. And they want to experience lots of different cultures, and they have a really good repertoire of lessons in year groups. Sometimes they can, they will advertise them like, I'm this year group teacher, and they'll move to those schools so that they keep doing the same things because that's what they're very good at. And they say it's like I did say earlier, financially, it can be a way to earn and save money.
Mm.
In some countries, the taxes can be a bit different. You get benefits and so on, and so they do this to earn and save a nice bank of money, and then go back to their home country to work back in state schools as well. And they can take what they learn and help those state schools, because it does also look quite good on a CV, from what I hear. Haven't really moved myself, but having all these people who have come from different countries, I love learning about different countries, and then I like to learn about how their backgrounds are, and then
that's that diversity
that's
we were talking
diversity,
about before, right? All right, so let me ask you, and do tell me if this is too personal a question, but you mentioned career there. So how has teaching abroad impacted your career progression?
It's benefited my career progression, definitely. In my context, I'm working in quite a new school, and so there were gaps which I saw that I could use the area of expertise in to help and sort of push myself forward for. International schools love teachers who will put themselves forward. In a state school, you're sort of you go there and they'll say, you're now the head of art. I was like, oh, I didn't sign up for that, but I'll do it because that's part of the job role and all of that. But in international schools, they love it when someone is like, in my specific context, I was like, that we need to get a phonics program. I know some good ones. I can help do research on that. I can take that.
So I guess, we're talking about sort of startup schools there, of which many international schools will be an example. But no, I think you're absolutely right. I think if you sign up for a school like that, don't do it if you don't want to get involved and you don't want to sort of stick your oar in. For want of a better term, I can phrase that much better.
Turn it into a better context. International schools love CCAs, love after school programs. If you have a special skill and you push yourself forward that, for example, if you have ballet experience, then you can go put that as part of your teaching, and that can help you another selling point for yourself as well, to go to more international schools saying, I've run these CCAs, they've been really successful. And that actually, a lot of international schools look for that. That's one thing they always ask, isn't it? What can you bring to our school that other people can't?
That is definitely.
And if you've got a specific skill that might not be part of the national curriculum, no, not every kid needs to learn ballet, but a lot of kids do, just for that random example, then that is really something that, and if you enjoy teaching that as well, then you can make that part of your weekly teaching, because then you've got every week you're going to have
if I was to give a tip to someone applying to work in an international school, it would be to really emphasize that parts of your skill set. If you have, ballet is a lovely example. If you are proficient in music, or you've run a debating society before, or you're very good at sport, or you want to do some coaching or something like that, a lot of international schools will really, really value that, especially, and this is that cultural element as well. We've talked about the parental expectations around language, and as we were talking about, there are parental expectations around the culture of the school as well. And especially if the skills that you bring may be, let's say, representative of the culture the school is trying to promote, that will often be really, really strongly valued. So, for example, if you work in a British school and you're a rugby fanatic, that's the sort of thing you really want to emphasize as well. Because if that's something you can enrich the school with, I think that would be viewed incredibly positively by the school community. So, going back to, sort of looping back to something we were talking about earlier, you mentioned English, learning English, the EAL. Obviously, you would expect in most international schools in other countries, maybe all or most of your children to be English, to have English as an additional language, to not be fluent, to not be native speakers, or maybe not to speak at home. Not all of them, obviously, but many of them. Now, tell me about that, because the thing is, maybe if we were having this conversation a couple of generations ago, that would have been a huge difference. But I'm going to go on a limb, and I'm going to say that most people listening to this, if they're a teacher or if they work in schools in the UK now, EAL is not a niche thing at all. It is a bedrock of what they do. There are not, I feel there are very few classrooms in the UK now which have no EAL in them whatsoever. What I'm saying is it's a standard part of the teacher's skill set and the daily experience. So is it different the way you communicate with your children, the way you use English in the classroom, is that different in an international school? Or actually, because the UK, I think, is, and especially in some parts, incredibly diverse, and the younger generation are the most diverse generation, is actually there not a great difference between schools in the UK? What's your experience been with that?
So for the EAL children, the difference is that the ones in the UK, they are in a constant English speaking environment inside the school and outside of the school. And even where the parents themselves, who also might be EAL, they might have a mixture of language spoken at home because they want to, because they know that they're in an English speaking environment, living in an English speaking environment, and want to help their children with that. Whilst in the context of international school in a country where English is not one of the country's languages, and once they leave that school, they do not get any kind of exposure to English. The progress might be just a little bit slower, and we need to make sure that the pupils are getting as much English as possible in the classroom. The school that I work in, we do something called translanguaging, where we do not ever stop the pupils from saying you cannot speak Japanese. We encourage a combination of both, because they are bilingual. I don't know if trilingual is what they're multilingual.
I'm sure someone's trilingual, quadrilingual.
Yeah, they speak so many different. It's the EAL is not just Japanese English, it's Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and English, and so many other languages that they're learning. And what I really try to focus on is helping improve vocabulary with these pupils. That's one of my big targets. And so there's a lot of me modeling, a lot of reading, a lot of the pupils. When I always encourage, if you ever hear a new word, don't just ignore it. Ask about it, write it down, and if you can't ask it now, ask it later, because they might not get exposed to a lot of vocabulary outside of the classroom. For example, in a story I was reading to my pupils recently, it came across the word mysterious, and that would be a word that I would probably expect in my British classrooms that the pupils would know in the Prep 2 or Prep 3, but in this classroom they had never heard that word before, and we sort of was able to unpack the meaning of it by using simpler language. Mysterious, something you don't know. And you really have to find a way to help pupils learn new vocabulary and then try to apply it. And then whenever they come across new words, find a way that they can understand it. I do a lot of charades in my class.
International language
Exactly.
charades, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Right. Okay. So again, that's that. I suppose it is important to remember, isn't it, that you may be, I mean, obviously depending on the context, you may be the sole English input that child is getting
for that day,
and yet the expectation on the school may be my child goes to an English speaking international school and therefore is a fluent speaker.
Even an EAL 8-year-old in England and an EAL 8-year-old in Japan, what they know shouldn't be seen as being the same. They shouldn't you shouldn't expect them to be at the same level. Because maybe the one in Japan has only been learning English for 2 years. The child in England maybe has been born in England and has been going all the way through the process for the last 8 years. And all of their friends speak English. All they do is speak English. But we don't. I know it happens at some schools where they say at school you only speak in English. It's not something that I've experienced, and I quite like the translanguaging approach personally. I know you spoke that to a previous guest, Jason Bentley, I believe, and it's something.
Good knowledge of the show.
Yeah. And it's something
go back in the archives.
It's something that I do think in the long term, you have to remember this. You can't think of short-term goals for the pupil. It's the long-term goals with them. In that year, in the 9 months, it's not even a year, is it really? They have people has with a teacher.
Right.
In the 9 months spread across the year, how much progress have they made? And then what is that individual pupil's targets and how to help them? It's a lot of trying to help support parents as well, because sometimes the parents don't speak any English at home, and they want to help their pupils, their children at home as well. My favorite is just to simply offer them, like, listen to audiobooks. If you got something on Netflix, put the subtitles on. It can be very simple strategies for these.
I mean, like you say,
Yeah.
very willing, very engaged.
Yeah.
That's been experienced so far. Right. So let me change let's change direction here a little bit. We've been talking about the children, the school itself, the parents, but let's talk more about the teacher and what it's like personally and professionally to make this change. So, challenges. Now, you can be as specific as you like with this, but what are the biggest challenges that you feel people face when they move to work in an international school?
Even as someone who's visited Japan, culture shock is can be quite. The feeling of when you've gotten off the plane and you're in either because usually they'll be very nice to school, or put you in a hotel room for a little bit or in a temporary accommodation to settle you in, and you sit down, you're like, I'm actually here, because the process is so long to get there.
Right.
You know,
It take months and months, right? There's nothing as bureaucratic as
I applied
in
in
country.
I applied in March. My interview was in April. I got the job offer in April, May, and then that's May, June, July. 3 months of preparation, visa, police check, background checks.
God, my experience with police check, it's still, I still have nightmares about it. I remember applying. I think my timeline was quite similar to yours. I distinctly remember logging onto the website for the international police certificate check that you have to get, and there being a notice saying that due to a cyber attack, the website was down, and you had to sort of email in your application, and what should have only taken, I think, 2 weeks or something, was now taking an unspecified period of time. And there was a period when everything else was sorted except for this, and I had to send these sort of pathetic kind of pleading emails saying, please, if I don't get this piece of paper from you, I may not get this job, and I've already, handed in my notice at my old job, and like, please, can we do it? It was all fine in the end, but I guess the lesson to draw from this is it's not necessarily it's not hard, but it does take time. Like, you cannot last minute it by any stretch.
Admin is stressful. You got to make sure your passport is up to date, because if you suddenly find out, I've got 6 months left and I need to leave, that could be stressful. You got to, the visa process, it's different for every country. Me trying to apply to the visa, I was waiting up at midnight because since COVID, they had to book appointments to get to the embassy in London.
If anyone from the Japanese embassy in London is listening to this, please reconsider the visa booking system. Sorry, I know that's a very niche concern.
Yeah,
I felt I had to say it.
Waiting up at midnight on a Tuesday to book, because it comes live, and then
it comes live at midnight. It's like you're getting tickets to Glastonbury or something, right? And then boom, all the appointments get snapped up straight away.
And if you just have to sit down and focus for an hour and then send stuff off and then wait, and the waiting is hard.
It's the waiting.
But then, like I said, that moment of the feeling of landing, sitting on your bed and just like, I'm here.
I have arrived.
Yes, it's for me, was a wonderful feeling, because it's like a whole burden came off my chest. And then suddenly you've got to have the pressure of, how do I find a house in this country? How do I get a mobile phone?
You have a moment's relief, and then real life comes knocking again.
I can't get my bank until I get my mobile phone. To get my mobile phone, I need a bank account. Oh my goodness!
You know what? I mean, I think so much in life is about disposition, right?
Yeah.
It's about, these problems will always come, but it's about the outlook you approach them with. And I think if you try, I know this is easy to say and it won't always feel this way, but you have to accept that it's an adventure that you have chosen. And yes, getting a new bank account, getting a mobile phone, moving, all this sort of stuff, it can be a huge job. It can be stressful, but also it's that adventure.
Yeah. And you're stressed, but your school is chill because they've done it so much.
Right.
And they know the process.
Right.
So they will give you support, and they might seem quite relaxed about it because they know everything that could happen.
Yeah.
And they will help you.
And if they've offered given you the job offer, they want you.
They want you to
I
stay,
don't
yeah.
think they're going to sort of rescind the job offer because
No.
you're a week late because the visa came through late or
Yes.
something. You know, like it can feel quite high stress at the time, but really the school is made up of people just like anywhere else. And if they want you, they will be flexible and supportive.
Every teacher has gone through the same experience at that school. They've all had
Right.
to go through those processes, and they all have great tips. They know the good mobile phone services to use.
Yeah.
They know the agents who can help you get those housing, the better housing than some of the other ones. They know the good restaurants. They'll help take you out. Usually
It's just a world to explore. It's a world to learn about.
If you as we said, there's a lot of changeover. If you land, you're probably not going to be the only teacher starting at that time. There's probably going to be a small group of you, and you get a nice little camaraderie with those. Like we're the new people, and we're going to band together and help, and then go explore together. That's so much fun.
That's so right. I mean, I think that's an effect of, like I said before, a lot of international schools. A lot of people working there will be on contracts for a couple of years at a time. So every year with a larger school, there will be lots of changing of people. So if you are part of a new cohort, you are probably going to have a group of people who are starting the same time as you. So you will have, like you say, camaraderie. Absolutely. And that's lovely. So you mentioned tips, and I really want to get into advice and tips, the kind of things that we wish we had known, and we're going to give some concrete tips and advice. But first, another challenge. Now, I'm talking personally here, but I do think this is probably the most common challenge that any international teacher will face, is that loneliness and that distance from the people back home. And so, I mean, Japan's a funny one because our homes are in the UK. So obviously it's a different country, but it's very far away. You can't get on the Eurostar. You can't pop back for the weekend. And it seems silly with the technology. You would think with modern technology, it's so easy to communicate with people back home. And in a sense it is. But even time zones really mess things up because it's actually quite difficult to arrange to talk with someone back home, especially on a weekday. And even if you are talking to someone on a weekend, you're talking to them at 8 p.m. or something, they will be 11 a.m. starting their day. So there's a sense of disconnect there. So how do you cope with that?
I was asked this in my interview question, actually applying for the school.
Oh.
And I said, always say yes. Your body might be saying no, but say yes to any kind of info you're getting at the start, because people will reach out to you because they understand that feeling and they want you to feel welcome. And so try to, if someone invites you just to go to a simple coffee chat in the local Starbucks, or go just for a round, a walk around the park, and you're kind of like, oh, it's so early in this night, I don't want to, I'm so tired. Say yes, because you'll appreciate making those connections with the local people around you. And luckily in this modern day as well, there is easier ways to communicate with people abroad. You were talking about time zones. My uncle lived in Hong Kong in the 1980s, so my nan didn't talk to him for like a month at a time. While in this day and age, I'll send a message and then my mum will probably reply a couple hours later. We're having slower conversations, and we try to arrange Zoom the Zoom chats every now and then when we can. But
I think always say yes is so right. And you are right, because when you're talking, when you might be planning your move abroad, your focus is on you and your situation, and it can feel like you're the only person doing it. But you are absolutely right to point out that that's very unlikely to be the case. At your school, you will probably start at the same time as lots of other people. And even those ones aside, everyone who works there, or lots of people who work there, will have done what you are doing and will be supportive. And it can be an absolutely fantastic community.
One thing I want to mention as well, that not everyone always can travel alone. There can be support for people who are couples,
right,
who have moved as well.
And families as well. Schools are often surprisingly is the wrong word. It was surprising for me. But schools are incredibly welcoming and supportive of couples coming and couples working.
Because when I would tell people that I'm moving abroad, and I moved abroad as a single man, but I'd tell my work colleagues in my British schools, and they're like, oh, that sounds lovely, I'd love to do that. but I can't because I have a child. I can't because I have a couple. It's like, look into the opportunities that could be around for you to potentially move with a partner, because they can help with visas. They could help with child going to that international school as well. Sometimes, not every, but sometimes those are part of the benefits that you get with these international schools.
It's funny, isn't it? Because as I was saying, I think that loneliness could probably be, for many people, the biggest barrier. The thing that even stops, it can maybe ruin their experience or stop them going in the first place. But you're absolutely right. There's lots of people, and they've said the same thing to me. They've said, "Oh, I'd love to do what you're doing, but I can't because my family commitments, my family is here." Whereas if you are lucky enough to be in a position where they can come with you, that sort of solves what is most likely to be your biggest problem. You bring your family with you. You will always have home is where the heart is to some extent, and the country will always feel welcoming, and I don't know, you'll always be able to come home to a loving family home at the end of any day if you bring your family with you, and that can really, really help. Although it might seem like a bit of a challenge at first to move with a family. I think we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to listen to the news, and then we're going to come back in a few minutes. We're going to carry on talking about international schools, and I want us to talk, if it's okay, Sam, about some tips, some advice, some words of wisdom.
Oh, I don't know if I believe that.
Give me a affirmative look there. That we might give to other people who are considering making this move.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271 because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? It's Bett Show's 40th anniversary and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies, and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.bettshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bett.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week reports on the impact government's decision to cut the Latin Excellence programme heads say will have on the poorest pupils. According to the article, many heads believe that the scheme has helped put state school pupils on an equal competitive footing for when they go to sixth form and university, and that the decision to cut it is disappointing. The LEP was created in 2021 to broaden access to Latin under then Education Secretary Gavin Williamson, after a 2020 British Council survey found that just 2.7% of state schools offered the subject compared with 49% of private schools. The decision to axe the scheme was made clear to schools just before Christmas, with the programme set to end in March. Head teachers have said that the mid-year withdrawal is particularly challenging, as schools may not be able to continue the subject until the end of the academic year due to funding squeezes. The response from heads follows comments made in December by high-profile historians and classicists, such as Tom Holland and Mary Beard. A Department for Education spokesperson said that the Independent Curriculum and Assessment Review will make sure all pupils benefit from a curriculum that delivers excellence. The BBC covers news that England's largest education union is voting on whether to accept or reject the government's pay offer of 2.8%. If the offer is turned down, the union will debate at its conference in April whether to hold a ballot for industrial action. The NEU has called the pay recommendation extremely disappointing. A Department for Education spokesperson called the union's response an extraordinary decision. NEU General Secretary Daniel Kebede said that the unfunded proposal was an insult to the profession and that it would lead to cuts to staff or resources or both. The ballot will open on March the 1st and will run until mid-April. The School Teachers Review Body, an independent group for teachers' pay, will recommend a formal pay offer later this year. In a separate dispute, tens of thousands of students in sixth form colleges across England were disrupted by strike action in the last week, as 2,000 NEU members staged a 3-day strike over pay. The September pay rise did not include teachers at sixth form colleges, as the Department for Education says they are responsible for setting their own pay. In Northern Ireland, some schools are to provide magnetic pouches to pupils so mobile phones can be stored during the school day. BBC Northern Ireland features comments by school leaders on the plan, which it is hoped will help pupils reduce the temptation to access devices during the day. Pupils have also responded to the scheme, with many saying positive things whilst acknowledging the challenges they may face. The plan was first proposed by Education Minister Paul Givan, but initially faced criticism over cost and issues around pupils' rights. Finally, as the cold snap begins to wane and forecasters start to talk about warmer temperatures on the coming days, many news outlets have covered the impact of the decision to close schools that can have on head teachers. Many have taken to social media to explain how the decision to close, or not, has affected them, with some describing it as awful and really stressful. Schools across the UK have faced challenges in returning after the Christmas break due to the weather, with some being affected by snow and ice, some by heating issues, or, after a thaw, even flooding. One head teacher told BBC Radio that as schools have become less localised, problems have increased. We used to be able to walk to school, but now both staff and children can travel longer distances to come to school. Another head talked of the difficulty in arranging the curriculum to suit online learning for a period of time, despite experiences of this during the pandemic. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
And we're back. This is the Saturday Social. I'm Will Mercer and I'm joined by Sam Houseago. We're talking international schools. Now, Sam, as I said before the break, we're going to talk about tips, advice, what we wish we had known before what we started to work in international school. As always, questions, comments, thoughts, please share them on the Podbean app. So, Sam, what do you wish you had known before you started out on this journey?
Definitely don't underestimate the support and knowledge you have EAL pupils. As we said, in England, there's a very high number of EAL pupils that we all give support to, and that's the same in international schools. And that's what a lot of them look for. So that's a really good thing to highlight when you're doing interviews, but also when you move over, what experience and what strategies you know for EAL pupils, because that's a really good thing to hold on to for that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, then I'll throw in something that I wasn't fully aware really of how it works. Now, I don't know whether this is a Japan-specific thing or whether it does actually apply to lots of different schools, but you're unlikely, when you're talking about the conditions of the job, you're unlikely to be just given a simple number for your salary. Instead, you'll probably be given a base salary, and you'll be given a number which is your housing allowance. You might have a travel allowance. The school may or may not offer free lunches or subsidized school lunches, and there may be bonuses or other things that come with it. So I would say my advice to anyone would be to really look at the work offer very, very closely and add it all up. Don't just look at the salary. because that's unlikely to be the only thing on offer. Also, related to that, look at the currency. Really do your homework with it. Now, I know that might sound very straightforward. I know lots of people already have thought of that, but I've definitely met people who seemed a bit surprised that the currency that they're earning in is really not working for them, because they want to take it back to their own country. Their whole point of them working in one country is to save up money to take it back to another country. If you're planning to do that, please do take into account the relative strength or the weakness of that currency.
Yeah, the base salary that I was offered seemed very similar to my current salary. So I was sort of, if I just looked at them next to each other, when I got my job offer, it didn't really seem like I was getting any extra. But then once I actually factored in all those other allowances, I was getting a nice little pay bump. So I was pretty happy with all of that. You're paying for my house, great, love it. And then as well, just the cost of living in looking at those other countries, like you could do a quick search, like what's the average electricity cost in a Tokyo household or in another country household? What are the average cost of these vegetables? Lots of people online love to talk about, this is my day in the life of this country, and they're helpful, but don't rely on them, because sometimes they can be overly negative and not really portray a real sense of what it's like to be there. It's that single person's viewpoint. When you do, because there's, in Japan specifically, there's so many people on TikTok, Instagram Reels who be like, a day in a life is doing this. This is me going around the supermarket, how much it costs. And it's like, okay, but that's one very specific person's viewpoint. And my biggest pet peeve is when you go onto YouTube and it's like 10 worst things that you can do as a foreigner in this country. Because they're so...
you will never go broke making those videos. It's so tedious.
Don't watch them too much or at all, really, because don't
take them as the entertainment that they are. They might have a kernel of truth or a little handy hint, but do not take them as gospel.
They are full of stereotypes and opinions of probably just a single person.
For sure. Very subjective. So I think what you said about cost of living is really interesting, because it may really surprise you. And we know from the UK, inflation has been huge the last few years. So the cost of living in the UK has changed. I think it's very different to live in the UK to make ends meet in 2025 than it was in, say, 2019, for example, or indeed 2014 or whatever. So Japan, now we can talk we can talk with authority on that, because we do live here. The cost of living is far cheaper than it is in the UK, especially considering the fact we both live in Tokyo. If you were to compare how far your yen goes in Tokyo with how far your pound goes in London, I think there's a massive difference. And you can have, without getting too self-indulgent and going on about how I spend my money and what my grocery basket looks like, I will just say that your money does go a lot further here, and it can be quite hard to get a sense of that if you purely look online. The yen is quite weak at the moment compared to how it has been in the last few years. So if you were to do a currency converter and take the yen taken into pounds, you might think, oh, that's not a particularly high salary, why would I change countries for that? But it's very difficult to capture how far that local currency will go in the country. Now, as I've said, if your aim in life is to save an awful lot of your salary and then take it back to your home country, that is a different question. But if your aim is to spend, the vast majority of it in the country you live in, you have to get a feel for the cost of living. And I mean, one way to do that is to come on holiday to the country, I suppose. Or now, obviously, you're not going to be doing everything. You're not going to be paying rent. You're not going to be paying electricity bills in your country. But you'll get a sense of how much it costs to go on public transport, to go out for dinner, and do that sort of thing. Is there anything that you would give in terms of getting to know a country before you've committed to the contract? Do you have any other advice?
If you can visit before you go, that's a great thing. Of course, not possible for everybody. It can be expensive, and flights and here and the other. But then there's still you could try and find out about like the cultural things about that country. Are there any films, any kind of things you can get into. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in because it's so interesting. I think that's true. I think it's a double-edged sword, though.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very easy to romanticize a culture. In fact, it's more easy. The more foreign a culture is to your own, the more distance it may be, the easier it is to romanticize it. So, by all means, Japan is a great example for this. By all means, get into Japanese history, or maybe you really like sushi, or you like classic Japanese movies, or maybe you're just mad for anime, or whatever it is, and that's great, and that is part of the experience of living in the country. But not any one of those things is the whole aspect. Most people are people, and most people every day they get up, they go to work, they're concerned and they're worried about the sort of things that most people are concerned and worried about. Paying the bills, their family, their health, their job prospects, that sort of thing. And you can't. I would say if you romanticize the culture of a country too much, you can be in for a very nasty shock when you come and arrive. And that might not be obvious on holiday. If you're only coming for 1 week, being on holiday is great. You might have a wonderful time when you're on holiday and think, oh, this is brilliant. I want to live in this country because it's always going to be like this. You have to remember that dark, rainy Tuesday when you wake up and you don't want to go to work. That's going to come. And you've got to accept that. You've got to be so sure that you will be happy living in the country, even when once that honeymoon period is over.
What would make it easier is to start learning the language as before you arrive. So I think we've met quite a few people at work, outside of work, who are foreigners in the country who don't know any of that language or know the bare minimum, and it can make life a lot more difficult. Even if it's just a simple hello, my name is, thank you, where is the toilet? That will make your life a lot easier. And then, you're not just going to absorb the language when you get to that country. You do need to make a bit of an effort to try and learn to maybe not necessarily read, but speak it is easiest.
It's that loneliness thing that we were talking about before. It's quite easy, especially if you've gone there by yourself. It can be quite easy to feel. You may feel you have friends and colleagues at work, but then once the working day is done, you may feel alienated from people around you if you don't have. I mean, you don't have to be fluent to be friendly with people, but if you don't have hello, thank you, goodbye, whatever it might be, or the confidence to power through at a cafe or whatever, then it can be weirdly isolating. And I think it's quite difficult to put into words unless you've experienced it yourself.
Yes, not every country is going to have stuff in English for you. They're not going to try and hold your hand as a foreigner. So you kind of need to help yourself. And I think it's also quite respectful to try and learn the language of the country you're learning in. And it's also quite enjoyable because then you'll start hearing people around you like, I know what that person said.
You'll understand what they're really saying. And you'll understand what the kids are saying as well sometimes, which can be a mixed blessing as well. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, like everything in life, it's finding the happy middle. I think learn about the country, do your research, educate yourself, find something about it you enjoy, find an aspect of it that you enjoy about the country, but also at the same time remember it's full of people that are just like you. They have their own flaws. There will always be the rough with the smooth, the fly with the ointment. Nothing will ever be, the grass will never always be. It might be a little bit greener, but it won't. The sun won't shine every single day. To mix my metaphors terribly.
Another tip, which I think took my school a little bit longer than it should have done, is to learn the swear words, because those kids might think they can get away with it around you because they don't think they can understand it, but they might try. And if you can catch them out pretty quickly, then it nips that thing in the
looks on their faces when they realise.
You know what they've said, and then you kind of have to explain it to them like, I know what you said. And it's not a very nice word. And I might, I think that's definitely quite a helpful thing because, kids are kids. They're pushing boundaries.
Absolutely. Right. We are going to take one last quick break. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back in just a minute and we're going to talk more about international schools and our reflections on the UK state sector.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271 because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? It's Bet Show's 40th anniversary and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.betshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bet.
And we're back. This is the Saturday Social. I'm Will Mercer and I'm joined by Sam Housego. Right, so we've only got a few minutes left. And I want to share one thing that I found that's very, I feel, unique to the international school experience that was very different from my previous experience in the UK. And that is, if you imagine a Venn diagram, right? So you have your two circles, and if you have you're making it with your hands, I like that. So if you've got your Venn diagram where you have on the one circle your work life, and on the right your personal life. Well, at a lot of international schools, that's just a single circle. The two overlap almost totally, and that can be a real blessing. I mean, like you said earlier, Sam, you put it brilliantly. When you come to a new country, when you come to a new school, you will meet lots of people who will be your support network. They will have done what you have done. They will be full of brilliant advice. They will get you through it. On the other hand, I suppose the flip side of that is that it can sometimes feel as though you wake up, you go to work, that is your social circle, that is your life. And then you come home, you rest, you recharge, you sleep, and then you go and you repeat. And on the weekend, on the holidays, all your contact with other people in the country are people from work. Now, if you really get on with people from work and you are that sort of person, that's wonderful and that's brilliant. And it can be nice to see people outside of work socially and everything. Because, I mean, you know, I'm sure many of us have worked in schools where people didn't really socialize outside of work, and it can affect the actual work culture a bit. But of course, as I'm sure people can already tell for themselves, that may not always work out well. If you don't get on with the people you work with, or perhaps you just don't want to socialize with people from work, outside of work, you want to switch off and turn away from that part, that can be a challenge. How have you found that?
Yeah, it can be a challenge. I feel very fortunate. I do enjoy a lot of my work colleagues. You know, I found people who, like, on a Friday would be like, do you want to go pub? Yeah, let's go pub, let's go do that. But as well, you know, I wanted to find and meet people where I don't have to talk about my job. I don't have to talk about work. And so you just have to find those groups of shared interests where there will always, if you have a strong shared interest, let's say, for example, it might be dance, it might be painting, it might be some kind of hobby, there will be a group out there that is dedicated to that is of other expats, which you can go join. And there's, you know, and that can, and usually it's like every week or every 2 weeks and so on. So that really does help make it feel like, oh, I'm living a life outside of my job in this country.
It's part of the adventure, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose. I mean, if in for a penny, in for a pound. If you've already made that jump to another country, you then have to take that further step to push yourself out there and make new friends.
And solo traveling is a good thing. Take the weekend by yourself, go book a hotel, go somewhere, that's about an hour away, and many people do it. I think some people in their mind find it's like, oh, it's a sad thing to go travel by yourself. No, it's a wonderful thing to go do, to go and explore by yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. And then, get a book, get a podcast, go listen to that, and then come back and, separate yourself from work and enjoy the country that you're in, wherever that may be. But then
that's part of it. Sorry, I know I'm interrupting, but part of it is we all like our creature comforts, and you can get Netflix and whatever it might be, wherever you are in the world now, and that's brilliant. But I what I always try to do is every weekend I do at least one thing that I can only do because I am here and that I couldn't do back in the UK. So, where I'm from in the east of the UK, there's no mountains. There's barely any hills. But around here in Japan, we have a lot of mountains. So I try to climb a lot as well. Now, I didn't know anything about climbing mountains before I came here, but I do it as much as I can now because I appreciate there will be a time when I'm no longer here. I won't be able to do it. I may never be able to do it again. So it's sort of seizing the moment and making the most of the place that you are in.
And if you explore and you get to know your local area, get to know the good restaurants, you're going to have visitors and they're going to expect you to be a tour guide, which is really fun for some of us, not so much fun for some. But if you know the good places and make your, whoever's visiting you, life's a lot easier and, enjoyable, you will also enjoy it as well because
for lots of people,
gets you ready.
Yeah, well, for lots of people, that is one of the joys, maybe the unexpected joys. I found lots of people have wanted to visit us here.
I'm a holiday for every member of my family now.
Exactly. You will often find yourself hosting lots and lots of people and really spending lots of quality time with them in a way that may not have happened when you actually lived closer, funnily enough. So we've only got a few minutes left. So I want to sort of bring things back to where we started, which is our beginning context. So you and I, we both started teaching full-time in the UK. Well, actually, we both weren't teaching English as a foreign language, but after that, when we returned to the UK, we both taught in state schools there. And having been out of that system for a while now, being away from it, do you feel there's any reflections or any, let's call them insights, that you've had about the system you left behind, for good or bad? Are there any things that you think, actually the UK does really well and I didn't appreciate when I was there? Or on the other hand, are there things that you think, what, why do we do that? I don't get it at all. And now I'm in a system that doesn't use it. I don't think we should ever use it at all.
I think I do have to praise, I think the British curriculum is quite good. I know they're currently reviewing it or coming up to it, but the one that it can tell you quite what of the stuff you want to teach. And it's got flexibility in it. And I do appreciate that. Moving to what I'm doing now is International Baccalaureate. I'm now learning a new curriculum. I'm trying to adapt to that. And I'm really enjoying it. It's growing me in that. But I was trained in the British curriculum. And so that I kind of didn't appreciate because I'm sort of growing and learning my job again. I feel like I started again a little bit.
But in a good way, right?
In a very good way, yeah.
I mean, because if you're like me, I feel like I've learned a lot.
I've learned so much teaching it. More, I think I've learned more in the year and a half here than I did at 4 years. But that's also because there's some people who are very stuck in their ways in the British system and they aren't really growing and changing with the times. I didn't always have the best experiences in the state schools, which is another reason why I left. Sometimes the pupils can just be seen as pieces of data. I've definitely even had interviews where they just give me data and no names and say, this is a class. I'm like, who are these kids? Because what I'm finding is that there's a far more emphasis on relationship building, knowing the pupils as individuals and who they are.
So there's another top tip I'm seeing here, which is if you're going to an interview for an international school, ask about the curriculum. Ask very clearly, what is it you're teaching? And if they do say, and a lot of them may say the UK national curriculum, because that is adopted by some British schools abroad. And if that's the case, great, but ask them how they adapt it for the local context. Because I imagine it would be very unlikely for them to teach it exactly as it would be taught within the UK.
And then there's also countries where you might have to be teaching it alongside with the country's curriculum as well, or the international baccalaureate curriculum. So how that can be adapted, but you probably realise that there's lots of crossovers, and all of that.
Yeah. So talking about interviews there. Now, I am aware of the time, but let's try and get in a few helpful bits of advice before we go. What advice would you give someone? If, let's say, I've applied for a job, I've got an interview coming up next week at an international school. I mean, I can tell you one big difference is if you're applying for a school in the UK, you can go and see it. You can physically go there. You'll probably have your interview there. You can go on a tour there. Great. If you're applying for an international school, there's a very high chance the entire process will be through the internet. You'll probably have your Zoom interview. I've had an experience before of filming a lesson. Now, it was a lesson that I had to film, but I wasn't allowed to show any children in the film. So it was basically an iPad trained on the whiteboard, and sort of my left hand was waving around in the side of the screen occasionally. And honestly, I don't know how much you could really tell about how I taught from that video. But I guess the point of it was to get a sense of you, because international schools are going to get an awful lot of applications from all over the world, and they really have to try and figure out who will fit culturally with their organisation.
Yeah. One tip I would give, one question that they will always ask is, why this country? It's not always going to be why this school, it's going to be why this country, because what they're looking for, people who they can be confident will commit to going to that country as well, wherever that country may be, because they've probably had experiences where they've offered the job to people and then suddenly they back out. And so they want to make sure that that's what is very confident that you are happy, willing, and ready to go move to that country. So they'll probably want to hear your passion for it, your knowledge on it, and experiences you have.
And as we were saying before, it can take months and months to set up to complete the process of moving to a place. So if someone accepts the offer, it comes up to term time, and then for whatever reason they don't go through with it, all of a sudden the school is a bit stuck, because it will take them, they have to go back to square one, and it will take months to replace that person. So I think you're absolutely right. I think communicating that willingness and that enthusiasm, and that to show you've done your research and to show you know what you're talking about, that's important in any interview, but that's crucial in an international school one.
Yeah, definitely. And also, are you ready to commit for 2 years as well? Because in the British schools, it's basically a 1-year contract or they'll just get a contract, and you can leave. You can give just 3 months notice and leave if you want to. But it is a 2-year commitment to move to that country as well. So are you ready to commit for 2 years?
And there will probably be a bit of money you have to spend to move and to get yourself set up and buying furniture. So often a lot of teachers will find the first few months, if not the first year, is spent sort of paying that back. And you might only make a proper profit, as it were, 6 months in or a year in or whatever. Many schools will also incentivize you financially to stay until the end of your 2-year contract.
It's very common for a plane fare to be part of your contract. You get one one airfare to go back to your country, of up to a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
But typically the first flight there is not included in that.
It's the flight back.
It's the flight back for the summer holidays or the winter holidays or whatever it is. But the initial flight they might not be paying for. So that's out of pocket. And that could be, depending where you're going, for going to Japan, it was almost £1,000, So I think when I moved, I needed to have a minimum of about £4,000 to have that. But that's very specific to this context. And I also just like to have savings underneath me.
It's just do your research, right? But it's a wonderful. We're going to have to wrap up soon, but I mean, it's a wonderful adventure. I'm so happy I did it.
I fully agree. Yeah. I do not have any regrets about moving here, and I'm very happy that I'm renewed my contract. I'm staying for another 2 years.
Wonderful.
I know. Pat myself on the back for that.
Well, I mean, there's a great note on which to end. Right. I'm Will Mercer. This has been the Saturday Social. We've been discussing international schools. Sam Alsago, thank you so much.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.